say good morning, and I've asked Bill if he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Sure. Yeah. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Has the agenda been posted? Okay, Nadia, the roll call, please.
Commissioner Altman excused, Berryman excused, Breslin, Cole,
Here.
Clarkson,
Here.
Corcoran excused, Dada,
Present.
Freeman,
Yes.
Hedrick,
Here.
Kern,
Here.
Hughes, here, King,
Here.
Pattison, By,
Here.
Gleason,
Here.
Schmitz,
Here.
Swearell,
Here.
and Jones.
Here. All right, we have a quorum. Have the acceptance of the agenda? Does the agenda look all right? Are there any additions, deletions, changes, reordering, anyone wants to recommend?
Move to accept.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, the agenda is presented. We have one request for public comments. It's limited to 3 minutes on any subject within the purview of the commission. And Jeffrey Bernstein is asked to be recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Jones, Director Nolan, Commissioners. My name is Jeffrey Bernstein. I'm one of the owners of Destination PSP, a locally owned business in Palm Springs. As many of you know, Commissioners, I've been very vocal about the need to have local representation and more interesting food, beverage, and retail at this airport, which is a great airport. And I know through marketing that seems to be the direction the Commission is taking. I know that you've hired a consultant to work on this project. But I also realized after the last meeting I attended here that he made some other suggestions about what may be goals of an improved retail concession food and beverage at the airport. It's not just about guest experience or revenue, but also as a reason for people to come to this airport. The CBB is doing a whole marketing campaign on Palm Springs Airport, or they did, but they don't mention really the food, shopping, or beverage. At the last meeting, you talked about the need to get people to come to the airport early. And I believe it was mentioned that there is things for people to do here, but I think it would be hard pressed to tell people that this is a great place to get something to eat or to go shopping, and they should come early for that reason. I have a business downtown. We also are in several hotels. We deal with a lot of events and tourists. And most commonly, they say where can we get something to eat or go shopping before we go to the airport because it's so close. So I would just encourage that as you're going through this process, you look at operational goals and see how the concession improvement may fit into that. If you do have great food, beverage, grab and go, shopping, it is a reason for people to come to the airport 45 minutes, 90 minutes early, which is what your goal is. So that was my only suggestion. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak, and I look forward to more meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. Moving on to approval of the minutes. You have the minutes of the meeting of March 13th. Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
I wasn't here.
We do have abstentions. Obvious. Those of you who were not here are abstaining. Right. Okay. Nadia, on the adoption of the minutes? They were approved. The only people who abstained were those who weren't at the meeting, which is the logic. All right, now we come to the chairman's report, which is kind of a new addition. So first of all, another welcome to all of you. We have a very, I think, full agenda today, especially looking at the budget. Couple of things. Just as a reminder, the way I like to run the meetings, and it seems to move smoothly, is if you want to be recognized to speak, just raise your hand or a finger or whatever else, and keep a queue, so that you don't have to keep trying to raise your hand to get in. If I see your hand, I'll put you in the queue, and then I'll call everybody in the order. And it seems to work on other committees that I've chaired in Washington, D.C. and in Sacramento. So anyway, just a thought. We can give that a try. Actually, it's a little easier for all of you because you don't have to keep worrying about getting in. So there is that. The last meeting, I indicated that we would start this meeting by asking 2 or 3 commissioners to take 2 or 3 minutes to kind of give us a little history background of who you are. That came about because 2 or 3 of you, particularly newer members, would like, and actually continuing members too, don't know a lot about the commissioners. So what I was going to ask, actually I didn't even ask them, I'm going to start with Rolf, the vice chair, and then I'm going to go to then I'm going to go to Peter, then I'm going to go to Jeffrey, because this is one of his ideas too. So we'll start with Peter. Let's take 2 or 3 minutes to describe who you are and the relationship and the importance of how it relates to the commission. I think it'd be important.
You say you start with Peter.
No, I'm starting with you.
What's the time limit on this?
2 to 3 minutes, there you go.
Well, my background, my corporate background is in the airline business. I was an airline brat, actually. My family was in the airline business. I spent 35 years with Lufthansa in various assignments, mostly in the United States, but also as deputy director of the UK and Ireland and running the operation for the company in the Arabian Gulf states, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and Kuwait, etc., during a time which was not so pleasant. It was during the Iran-Iraq War. And then returned to the United States and was in charge of the for North America operations and marketing for the company. And then I took early retirement in '96, went into consulting for some aviation consulting companies. Then joined Aeromexico and ran Aeromexico's operation here in the U.S. for 6 years, based out of Houston, commuting from here. And then I retired again in 2004, went back into consulting for an aviation consulting company, and then joined what is now Desert Champions LLC, the company, a sports management company that runs the tennis garden. And one of my part of my portfolio and some of the positions I had in the past included, marketing, and part of that was sports marketing, and that is where the connection is to the position I currently have at Desert Champions LLC.
That's terrific. I learned something new. I didn't know about Aeromexico. I knew about Lufthansa. Very helpful, very helpful. Peter.
Yeah, I started my aviation career with Pan Am in 1960 in Germany. Came to the United States in 1965 with Lufthansa, and in fact, Wolf and I crossed paths, even though we didn't meet personally in New York. We were both with Lufthansa in New York at the very same time. I then moved over and ran the operation of a Thai carrier that was owned by the Royal Thai family, SIM. I started their operation to the U.S. and ran it for 5 years. And then moved over to LTU, which at the time was Germany's second largest airline. And I became president and CEO of their North American subsidiary. And actually had responsibility for all of the Americas, a big operation in the Caribbean as well. I retired in 2000 when LTU was acquired by Swissair, and since been associated with a aviation consulting firm in Miami, on and off. But I've been on the commission now for, I believe, 8 years, or it is my 8th year, the end of my 8th year, and I'm having a lot of fun being on the commission.
And it's been fun to have you here. Jeffrey.
Sure. I'm an attorney. I'm from Texas. When I first got out of law school, I worked for an LA firm, Gibson Dunn, but in their Dallas office. We did a lot of work for American, because American is based there. All sorts of transactions for them. Eventually, I went on, and at some point connections I have there and worked in-house as an attorney at American for a few years. And a friend of mine from law school was at Continental, and she said they were looking for somebody, so I went over to Continental and spent about a dozen years there as an in-house attorney. Did a lot of international work. I was responsible for legal affairs in Canada, the Caribbean, and Asia Pacific, and we were expanding a lot in Asia Pacific at that time, having roots to New Delhi and Hong Kong, and several other routes. Also worked a lot with smaller airports. I supported the real estate department with their lease work. ExpressJet Airlines in particular, which was our regional carrier at the time, and it was a subdivision now. It's completely separate from United, but it used to be a division of Continental. So he does a lot with airports of this size in lease work. Continental went away. I moved to California. I was when I came out to California. So I got a graduate law degree in LLM from UCLA, and have been practicing out here. I work mostly for family and friends.
That's great. Thank you, Jeff. I think this is very helpful for us. I think it gives us context when we're hearing individuals speak, and I see people nodding. So stay tuned. I'll pick the next three at the next meeting. I'll maybe try to give you
Advance notice, that wouldn't be fair.
Okay, it's extemporaneous. What I would like to just give a short kind of report about, we had the USO here last time, and then Jeff and I actually did the tour. And it was really kind of a great, one of the things I was going to suggest, if you have not visited the USO facility, I would urge you to do so. We found it very, very helpful. The notes I made at the time that the airport leases for $1 per year, the city council had voted to cover all the utilities except for Wi-Fi and cable TV. They serve over 30,000 men and women a year, which was, coming through there to take advantage of the facilities. You have to be on active duty or retired. A veteran alone does not qualify. The volunteers, they have a complete roster of volunteers. They take 4-hour shifts, something I'm considering doing when my schedule settles down. I'd like to do that too. Their budget is based upon all donations. They're getting really no money from anyone else. The Palm Springs USO is one of 6 in Southern California. It's kind of one crew of 6 folks, so they're kind of a confederation there. But they have a pool table room, they have a quiet room, they have a recreation room. They have pillows and blankets if overnight is necessary in the baggage area. There are arrangements with the airport if flights get canceled with the rest. Either they'll find some facilities in the baggage area, provide them pillows and blankets, and in security there have to be volunteer staff available there, or they may find space available at the USO. And they're open from 6 in the morning until 10 at night, and they will stay open all night in unique circumstances. For instance, they had 2 flights canceled in February, so they stayed open all night. I don't know, Jeff, if you wanted to add any.
Now, I just recommend that people go and take a look over there. I've always been curious about it, and it's interesting to go over there and see the facilities.
Yeah, I was great.
If I remember correctly, because that came up a couple of years ago when we had presentations, the USO here is not supported at all by Washington, correct?
Correct.
The federal government.
It's all donations.
It's all donations.
All donations.
Here.
Correct. Yes.
That was.
And they share donations. There's 6 of them, so they will share if they get food things. A lot of them down in the San Diego area, they will share among the 6, so that they will have a balance. But and the food is free. They come in. They have a little canteen.
The facility was one of the larger ones actually we have here. Physical plant itself and some of the
it's a bit chopped up. It's a little room here, a little room there. They've done a great job with the facilities, really making it a pleasant environment.
Just 2 quick questions.
Yeah, Patricia.
One is, how do we contact them if we want a tour? Do we just walk in? or-
Just walk in.
We just walk in.
Just walk in.
And the second is, are we working with the Legion here in Palm Springs at all to promote anything?
That I don't.
The Legion?
Yeah, the American Legion. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know.
But we'll find out. Report back.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. I don't know. Okay. Any other comments before we move forward? All right. We move now to introductions and presentations.
None for now, but under my reports we'll have a presentation.
Okay, great. Then we move to the city manager report. Mr. Red.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I just wanted to note that Tom will talk about it in the budget, but There's a letter going to council tomorrow, next week, actually, and I just wanted to let you know about with regard to ACE parking. I think we've had some discussion, general discussion of it here previously. This was basically the change, in a nutshell, the change of the minimum wage law in the state. They had asked for an increase in the contract. They have 2 years left. Certainly, we would not do something like that lightly, and we basically at the time we said no. They have since that time, which has been several months now. What we believe is that they probably might cancel the contract. Okay, so other than the side that we're going to start asking all the commissioners to help us in the ticket booth, we just realized that to turn around and do an RFP obviously is going to be at least a 3 to 4 month process, minimum 3 probably. And so we didn't want to have that kind of disruption. So what I'm going to be recommending to the council is that there's 2 years they're requesting. The first year was about 60,000. I'm going to suggest to council that we grant it for the first year only, and then we immediately start the RFP process, and we'll see what we get. So basically, we won't go within that gap. We won't lose them for a gap period. So that would be my request. I don't know whether council will grant it, but that's going to be on the agenda for next Wednesday. Now, ideally, that would have been here for your formal discussion and recommendation, but regrettably, it's not. But since you've had that discussion originally, I wanted to let you know what I'm planning, and if you're okay with it, I'll go forward and we'll see what council says. The alternative is to wait, agendize it at the next meeting, and then take it to council in May. The only thing is, Mr. Burton, who's the owner of the ACE, clearly, obviously, he's wanted this on prior to this. I committed to him it would be on this week. So I said to him, I'll go forward unless there's some real opposition here, we'll hold off. So that's in a nutshell.
Let me first remind, before we did start the questioning, that the commission did take a position on that, supporting the request.
Supporting it?
The budget.
The budget.
I mean, the budget.
Right, okay.
Right.
That's helpful.
Okay. So, starting with off top.
David, the increase, will that be retroactive to January 1 when the minimum wage went up, or it will be effective whenever the council approves?
Well, what I told him is because we're going to go out to bid now. So I said it would probably be fair to make it retroactive just for this year to January 1st. That's 3 months. Then we're going to start the RFP process. So I suggested it might be fair to do at least retroactively this year, January.
But there is another increase coming up next January, so you have to keep that in mind.
Yes, and that would probably be borne out in the RFP that we do, that whoever's going to bid, they'll have to probably just assume that that's the cost.
Norm?
I assume we have the right to terminate at any time by starting the process.
We do. 30 days?
16.
60. They have 60. We have 60.
We have 30.
I have to read, I know the outside is 60.
Yeah, I think they have 60, we have 30,
That's right.
generally.
The question that David has posed, though, I mean, is the commission opposed to his approach to this, given the timeline and the commitments?
Yeah, I mean, I remember we were actually, when it first came up, pretty much in favor, even though I think Norman brought up that we shouldn't be going exactly with what they were requesting, but basically it was pretty favorable. And I recall that they were a lot less than any of the other amendments. So I would think it is fair, and I would certainly support you to go ahead what you recommend.
And if I say, Peter, that's a great point, and that's part of the argument we made to the council when we did the RFP about 3 years ago. They were appreciably the lower bidder of all the others. So likely when we go out to bid, we're going to get a much higher, but that's just what the market will be. And of course, that's the RFP process, and that's where we will be in good stead as long as we do that RFP.
I fully support you. Do you need a motion from us?
Well, I don't, because it's not agendized,
No,
I
it's
just
not.
wanted to preview,
Yeah.
but as we do in council, normally if I get enough bad body language, I would take that to,
Can we raise
change my
hands
direction.
in favor? Can we
Yeah.
raise hands?
Well, I think I have some direction.
I don't think we need to even do that. It's not on the agenda, but there doesn't seem any major opposition. And Norm, you had a comment?
Well, yeah, and I was opposed, and it's, it's a tough kind of issue, but before they were representing that they were gonna go with the contract. Now, if we're hearing they're not, I think that's a different situation.
Yeah. So I guess as chairman, then I don't hear any major obstacles or opposition to the process that you plan to take. So I think it's fair to say you have the support to take that approach.
I just didn't want to surprise anyone.
You don't like surprises. Which is a good thing to know. All right, so anything else on the city manager's report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Could I ask if David will be here for the budget discussion?
Pardon me?
Will you be here for the budget?
Yes,
discussion?
indeed.
Oh, yes, we'll definitely be here for the budget. Pardon me?
We'll move right into that.
Yeah, we're next to the budget report. And I thought what we would do is start with Rolf, because there was a meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee, and then he's going to turn it over to Mark, and go from there.
There's a budget report, but because it's agenda, I just get into the agenda.
Well, let's start with the report first, from the committee perspective of the discussions to get a sense from.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a Budget and Finance Committee meeting on March 26th. You'll have in your packet the action summary of that meeting, and I just want to summarize a couple of items here and sort of give you sort of a timeline as to what happened subsequent to that meeting. As you will see in the action and discussion item here, Mark presented the budget and explained to us that there was a surprise in the budget in that the project, the ticket wing project, includes aspects that are not eligible for bonds and grants, and the number that is associated with the amount not being eligible is about $4.35 million. And as a result of that, plus some other cost items, the budget that was presented by Mark shows a deficit of $1.8 million the first fiscal year and $2.2 million the following year. One thing to note is that what Mark also explained, that the city council, correct, had requested that this year a 2-year budget plan would be presented, and this is why you'll have the numbers for year 1 and also year 2. There was then discussion as to how we can bring the budget into balance, and there were a number of actions recommended. One was to raise the parking fees, the amounts that are stated in the document here. There was also a discussion about raising the airline rates with the emphasis on making sure that we are still competitive as an airport in comparison to our competitive set and other airports of similar size and traffic numbers. It was also noted that with the new concession contract, an increase in revenue was anticipated. What was also important to note was that at the time of that meeting, we did not have the full the March numbers, and Mark indicated that with the March numbers, some of this could change, hopefully to the positive side, but we were operating on the premise that the budget would be in deficit. Another part of the conversation or the discussion was the inclusion in the budget of 2 positions that had been discussed here and previously. One was the engineers, the position of the airport engineer position, as well as the marketing manager position. And the motion was made and accepted that those 2 positions would be included. And then the next step was that we had planned on another meeting after this meeting. And We were, however, then informed that the budget, I believe the city manager asked Mark to revise the budget proposal by taking out the positions, the 2 positions, and to present a proposal to this commission today that would not include those positions, however, also include a way to balance the budget. As a result, you will see from the presentation from Mark that there is a way to rebalance the budget, including the positions that we had actually approved or recommended in the committee meeting. Is there anything I missed or misstated as far as the minutes were concerned?
No. I think what we can do, I misspoke. We're going to turn to Tom, who's going to lead the budget discussion.
We'll start that in the agenda item.
Let's move to that.
So you're going to close the budget reports? And
Yep.
we'll start the action items. Thank you,
Let's start
Mr.
the
Chairman.
action
First,
items.
and only on the agenda is the airport 2-year budget. And I want to compliment the budget committee for a very fastidious review of the budget process. And I think the thing I'd like to emphasize to the entire commission is that every year we go through every line expenditure, and we're always looking at ways to save and maintain a low-cost profile to make ourselves attractive in the airline industry. Nadia, do we have the budget? Mark, why don't you make your way over and grab the stick? Mark, come on over.
The stick.
The pointer. Come on over. Showtime.
I'm great, I'm waiting for the term, please.
This is the capital, Tom? This is the capital page.
Yeah, I won't look at that. But just, can you get some lights, please? Somebody, yep, there we go. During the recession, we really tightened our belt and we had to draw back on some things that typically probably would have been done, but we had to do that for expenditure savings purposes. I'll take the point, Mark, thank you. So we always have had unscheduled capital of about $200,000 in there. Things can happen spontaneously, unplanned, and then we have to address it accordingly. The TSA queuing office, you've heard about that project. We attempted to do it a year ago. The solution wasn't acceptable, so we have now built into it a full program. The great news on that is the TSA has approved a 6-lane configuration, and all we have to do is move an ops office, and by this next season we'll be able to integrate that in. The early estimates are this, but it's going to be more than that. We'll adjust that figure as we go. Carpet replacement is an ongoing thing. As you know, carpet does get dirty, it begins to smell, it begins to wear, and we are going to have to do some of that throughout Bono and RJ, and we do that on a cycle, and there's just a lot of it. Pavement fog seal is the substance we use to cover our pavements in an effort to minimize the deterioration of that. The sun is very harsh on pavements here. Ambient temperatures can be 150 degrees and just pull all those essential oils out of there. So we want to preserve our investment. We spent about $50 million over the last 10 years. We certainly want to preserve that the best we can and extend the useful life. Vehicle replacement is an annual thing. Vehicles are getting old and so forth. We have found out. Where's the sprinkler head? There should be a sprinkler head somewhere. Yeah, the ones that pop out here, but unfortunately there are a number of sprinkler heads like the one out on the ceiling there that may not be sufficient, so we've been apprised of that by the company that inspects those, and it may be time to actually replace those, and we have a figure for that as well. The other thing we're looking at is potentially the Bono palm trees. Unfortunately, at least 2 of them are beginning to rub on the fabric. That fabric on the Bono concourse is extremely expensive. And the last thing we need is it rubbing on the fabric. And so we'll look at what we can do to replace those or do something in nature. Gate constraints during peak season. Airlines have a propensity to all like the schedule during peak times. In Jumpstart this year, right, Bob? You and I are going to be talking to airlines about still wanting all the service they can bring in, but utilizing other hours of the day. And of course, network planning and that is very complicated. But our point is, we're going to look into some things to be able to at least wire our gates for some type of common use so that if you go up to a few of the gates, you'll see 3 or 4 podiums. If you notice that, as you enter the jet bridge, we need to clean that up a little bit, make it more efficient. Gate management software, that's another thing we're looking at, is because of the constraints that of the timing of all these and the airline's propensity to adjust their schedules throughout season, we need to employ some type of software. Unfortunately, that software can get expensive. We've been doing it by hand. We've been doing a tremendous job, but it's become almost unmanageable and sometimes unreliable because of the changes. Gate software will help mitigate that. Microlight System is the software program that runs all the lights in the terminal. It is obsolete. It doesn't have any more support. We have to manage our lighting, otherwise our electrical charges will get out of sight. We can't rely on flicking circuit breakers. Roof rehab outside that window, you can see a nice big bubble, and the paint is coming off on that roof, so we're going to do some roof replacement probably from here to the south. To the north, the other south end will be covered in the airline ticketing project. So we're going to have to do some roof rehab. Enough of that, right? We talked about terminal covering, TSA security, Mill Street, the Loop Road out in front. Again, we want to preserve pavements. We want to mill and slurry seal that. We should be doing that every several years. That's normal pavement maintenance. Portable air conditioning units for PC Air for the airlines. Now, because the regional terminal was built back in 2007, the whole strategy behind that with the airlines was they were utilizing regional jets heavily. We've seen a transition in our market from the regional jets now to the larger body, Mr. Chairman, if you recall the wider body. So therefore, we've convinced our airline partners to start utilizing to help relieve the pressure on the Bono concourse. Now, if you go down to the regional, we've already added 3 exterior placements for gates, but we need to have supportable equipment to allow the airlines to use that because there are some different nuances associated with that. Replace the crash foam in the airport tower. That's important, of course. Runway pressure washer. We have to remove rubber from the runway. If you've noticed when you're flying out, you can see the black rubber on the markings, and that builds up quite often. And so we're looking at an environmentally proactive way and not rely on contracts, which can be very expensive if we have a pressure washer in-house. One of those cost-saving things, we can get out there and do some pressure washing and burning. Trash compactors outside this window. We had a lot of refuse that builds up with our concession program, which will be gaining some steam over the years, right, in the ensuing years, and we've got to take care of those old trash compactors. TSA renovations, we've talked about, well, the market.
That's for prior
Yeah, that's about it. That's prior years. Why talk about that yet, right? Next page would be good, Nadia. Thank you. Any questions about the capital, Mr. Chairman? Next page, Mr. Stevens.
Does anyone have any questions?
What is the crash phone? That's interesting.
We don't like it's an emergency phone, so when there's an incident, they pick that up and rings down to the operations center, and it actually lifts the door in the aircraft rescue and firefighting station. We're out of the box, and we've got the critical time in any incident is those first few minutes. That's how we get tested every year. So we have to get to that and start to extinguish the incident.
The next slide refers to the revenues, and we did not make a slide because there's a lot of numbers and virtually impossible to read. So you should have all received that in your packet. The revenue page, what we did after the budget subcommittee, we actually peeled out some of our assumptions and just put together a revenue budget for next year and also the year after, just based on our normal and routine growth. And what you would see before you, of course, is there's 5 columns of numbers. The first is our actuals from 2016-17, actuals from 17-18, and then our current year budget. Just based on our growth, when we put the budget together, we did not assume that we're going to have a 12% increase over the prior year. The year has been very strong. So our revenues as well should finish above our budget for the year. Taking a look at that, projecting into next year, without any of the rate increase assumptions that we'd earlier put in, our revenue should exceed $24 million next year and $24.6 million for the year after. Under the solid total revenue line, you'll see a calculation for the airline revenues. This is a very common metric in the airport business, taking a look at how much the airlines cost is per in-plane passenger, and you can see the actual for 17-18 was $5.31. If we do nothing, go ahead, Norm.
Go through Al.
Yeah, why don't we let it finish through that and come back to it?
So if we do not increase the airline rates, which is reflected here on the first page, the cost per plane passenger in the airline will actually go to about $4.64. And the reason for that is our employments continue to grow, and if our rates stay the same, that number will come down to the airlines, and then also go down to 7 here. So any questions on that page?
Okay, Norm?
If I understand it, what you're saying is that this year we're actually going to be up 10-12% over budget in revenues, which means that projections for next year, preliminary estimate, would be about the same as what we're going to get this year.
Well, what I said was our employments are up about 10%. That does not reflect in every revenue category.
All right, so but there's still going to be a big bump of
Correct.
some percentage, I'm going to guess.
4 to 5% likely.
4 or 5. So half of that new revenue shown next year is what we're already getting this year.
Correct.
So you're basically assuming another 4 or 5%.
Correct.
Any other questions at this point?
What are the fees include? I see you have hold room fees, TNC access fees, loading bridge fee, and then just fees.
What are the breakdowns for the airlines?
Well, I mean, what are the fees? And you've got, as I say, you've got all these other fees listed individually, and then you have a generic fees.
That's account number 38129, Mark.
Oh, fees. That is a charge that is collected from the third-party carriers here at the airport. They pay there are various contracts with third-party agencies. They pay 7% of their gross to the airport for the privilege of operating. In many cases, they don't pay a square footage rent. They don't pay any other charges. They operate here under the umbrella of an airline. So for that privilege, they pay a 7% gross.
Okay, you want to continue?
I do have a question on the process.
Go ahead.
On the process, I mean, once the numbers are in for March and April, say, and let's say we are actually better than what you had forecasted, would there then be in the process another revision of the budget, or you would stay with this the same projections? Well, and that refers again to, let's say, that just percentage increases or other projections.
As we go along, there will likely be updates. So it will change. It will change the forecast.
Possibly also to the upside.
Correct.
Excuse me, may I ask also on the offset, are you going to discuss that a little further, or I have a question about the park.
Yeah.
So,
Question on what?
about the parking offset.
We're going to go into that.
Yeah, we'll go into that.
So let's move to page 2.
Right.
Page 2 just contains the general categories for the expense estimates. And looking at the administration of those various and sundry categories, the primary changes with expenses, the public safety is going up, as it typically always does. So the police budget is increasing about 13%, fire budget is increasing about 6%. All the other categories for the airport are a combined total. Some of them are going down, but the cumulative is the airport increases about 1.7% on the charges that we have control on. So taking a look at that, again, with no assumptions, we wanted to show the fact that the surplus with just the M&O budget is fairly close to last year's budget, just over $200,000 for 2019 and 20. So that would be the case if we really do nothing with rates and charges for next year's budget. The second year out, we would show a deficit. So again, we need to take a look at updating the numbers, other assumptions, and other things that are going to change before we reach the final document. The yellow highlighted area, the local matching funds for AIP grants, This current year, we had no new grant. We were just finishing grants from prior years, doing some of the enabling projects for our ticket wing project. We did the runway lighting, finished that project, and Erickson Son did other design fees that we were doing with the planning for the ticket wing project. Next year, our grant is expected to be about $6.9 million. The bulk of that would go toward the ticket wing project and some of the expenses that are eligible for the grant funding. With that, we have to come up with 10%. So for next year, our grant match would be $698,000. That would put, clearly for next year, that would put our overall capital funds, or our overall restricted funds in a deficit for just for the year. Now, as you know, we have reserves and other things we can rely on. This just takes a look at next year and the year after. And then the funds that Tom just went through, the capital projects, the local capital projects, we would have some offsets from Measure J and Measure D funding. So our total exposure would be for next year 1.3 million, the following year 1.4 million anticipated for capital projects. And that, if we do nothing, we put our deficit next year at just over $1.7 million, the second year 2.5 million.
Yeah.
I'm trying to reconcile what was in the budget committee report. It says PFC back tailoring project includes aspects not eligible for bonds and grants and money to 4.35 million. How does that relate to these two figures here in terms of local matching funds and capital projects? They don't
Those funds would come out of our reserve.
Those funds being
Just over $4 million.
4.5.
Yes.
So what you show on you're just talking about the local matching funds and capital projects are entirely separate from that?
Correct. Any other questions at this point? Thank you.
I'm still waiting on the parking issue.
Well,
The parking's coming.
we're getting
Okay.
there. We're getting there.
So we had, in the middle of the page, we have the black line, so you can see how things finish if we just continue as we are. So now, based on some of the discussions that we had at the budget committee meeting, some of the additional expenses that were considered were the two positions.
Al, I'm sorry, I had another question on the operating, if I could.
Okay, first go ahead.
Because I know we talked before about the escalating cost of cogen. And obviously, that facility was put in way back in the 80s to save money. I guess this is a question of David. Are we clear now that cogen, looking forward, saves us money versus Edison, I guess is our opinion?
No, not at all. I suspect it's the opposite.
So can that be undone in any kind of reasonable time frame?
Well, we thought of that over the years several times, but it can be, and again, I don't know the specifics, we need to drill down, but the general discussion was you'd have to switch to go back on the grid, and the infrastructure of that, which would include new air conditioning units, because now it's done by cogen, so in essence, we would have to
Well, actually, we do have probably 3/4 of the units we could support it now. We'd have to do a tune-up on the second unit and maybe replace that.
So it may be time to revisit that question. I know it was a multi-million-dollar venture when we last looked at it to do the conversion. So we were sort of in that middle ground.
But if it could be amortized over 10 years or whatever, it might make sense to look at that.
Unfortunately, now that we have the debt on the cogen, even if you did that, then you would force all that over to the general fund potentially. It would crater the general fund budget. So it's a tough position to be in.
Okay.
Dr. Reddy, are you saying that if we eliminate the cogen funds or whatever debt was outstanding, would we become due and payable?
Well, no, we'd still have to pay it. We'd still have probably at least 10 years to pay it. But certainly, then the question is, well, could the airport still pay their share? Well, A, that doesn't help you. And B, if it may or may not be legal, and if it's not, and then the city has to take it, then that's additional burden on the general fund of the city. So council would clearly take that into consideration if they would choose to go the other way on the infrastructure here. Especially now, I think a good review is in order, so we know exactly what we're talking about. It's certainly doable. It would just need a plan and a lot of discussion to get everyone on board, and probably a timeline to achieve it.
Wasn't there a lawsuit going in connection with this?
That's where we're headed. Yeah, but actually what the contract requires arbitration, mediation, so that's
First step.
where we're headed.
Last question, Norm, then we'll move on.
And I clearly appreciate the concern about the general fund, but as representatives of the airport, it seems to me that we probably should request where David was going, and that is some review of, is it possible, feasible, efficient to get out of this, and if so, how, over how many 30 years?
And I think the best way is to get some professional assistance in this area so we can get some definitive answers. I think that the time is coming. So we'll proceed with that, Mr. Chairman. Actually, it makes good sense, so we'll go ahead and proceed.
Okay, that'd be good. All right, continue.
So we were looking at the exposure of the 2 additional positions and the rough estimate of what that cost would be. And you can see what the surplus and deficit resulting from that would be just over $2 million the first year, and then with everything else rolled up by $2.8 million in the second year of the budget. As the committee discussed, there were several different options discussed, various things that takeaways. We may not have captured everything, but summarizing those things, one of the things we looked at is adjusting the public parking rates from $3 per hour and $17 per day, which we're currently at, increasing that to $4 per hour and $18 a day. The estimate would show that we would generate an additional $325,000 the first year. And if we took that a step farther, in the second year, increase the hourly rate to $5 an hour and $19 a day, that would compound to $535,000 the second year. The revenue potential offset for raising airline rates, we'll notice on the third page, we'll take a look at the summary of what the airports are costing per plane passenger. But if we increase our cost per plane passenger to roughly $5.80, that would generate $1.5 million. Second year, if we step that up to $6 per plane passenger, that would generate just over $2 million. And then the third item that we talked about, currently our food and beverage contractors are paying 8% gross to the airport. We have an opportunity, if we amend their contract and increase that from 8 to 12, that would generate $280,000 first year and $295,000 the second year. All those things combined would then put us in a surplus situation.
Now, the surplus, is that after the additional position for the engineer as well as the marketing manager? Correct. Okay. So it's everything that you have above, adding into the airport engineer plus the marketing manager, the revenue enhancements, and then covering all of that would bring us into the surplus. Correct. Standing. All right. I don't know, Kathleen, did you have your hand up or no? You just doing that? Okay, so we have. Oh, did Patricia first? Okay.
Now we're on parking.
Yes. Okay. Now that you're on parking, yes, you're
Yes, we are.
All right.
I actually have commented on all 3 of the potential revenue issues, and I wasn't at the meeting, so I apologize for that. But raising public parking rates, I'm not opposed to that, but I'm thinking that this gives other transportation an advantage, the Lyft, the Uber, the taxis. So is there room, instead of raising public parking, to negotiate, any wiggle room to negotiate with these groups? I don't know.
Let me answer that, Mark. So you're saying in regards to negotiating with the other modes of transportation?
Because they're getting an advantage. Public parking goes up, people are going to take more of the other types of transportation.
And that necessarily isn't a bad thing.
No, it isn't.
It isn't. So as far as negotiating, what we do is look at that cost center and try to charge the ground transportation alternatives to offset that cost center. We are running out of parking. In a couple of years, we will be there. So in a way, it is a very subtle way to maybe dissuade people from parking if its elasticity to the pricing is a factor. But to answer your question, we look at all ground transportation alternatives and charge them accordingly.
Thank you. And then I also have 2 other parts
Sure.
of this.
Okay.
The other part is the food and beverage, and that's a question I want to ask because we're trying to get more food and beverage, local people in here, and if that goes up, that's not gonna happen.
Well, the fact is, what he's referring to here is we'll probably have to extend the existing concession routes. But in the new concession program, which we're going to begin with your committee soon, very soon, we've got a preliminary report from the consultant is our current program is doing very well compared to others, but we can do better with the addition of some additional space. I can assure you that the concessionaires are doing okay, and there is latitude for more of our piece of the pie. We think that increasing the quality and the availability of different concessions, like our guest mentioned, that having to do that will actually create more concession revenue and allow us to get a larger piece of the pie.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Very good.
Okay, in the queue, Peter, and we'll go over to Peter's next, and then
Yeah, my question is rather than, the two-step increase, can't we just bite the bullet and immediately go to the $5 and $19?
Talking about public parking.
we're just talking about public parking, rather than doing
Rather
two
than
phases.
going, raising it this year and then again raising it next year, why don't we just raise it to the level that we have in here for next year?
That's a possibility. In the queue though, here first, and then come back after you.
So I looked at parking at our competitor airports, and even at $19, we're low. Versus like San Francisco at 36, LAX is 40, Ontario is 25, Burbank, which I wouldn't know is comparable to us, but still is 32. San Diego is 20. And on the short-term thing, some places offer 15 minutes free. I mean, if you come into the parking lot, pick up someone, and get out in 15 minutes, you're in good shape. But after that, you can be tagged as much as $5 to $8 at some of the other airports. So I think we're still dirt cheap. And also, when we go in, most of us, not everyone, but let's say me, when I go online looking for an airfare from Palm Springs to whatever, I don't look at parking fees. I look at the airline rates. So if I can get a flight to Amsterdam for $850, I'm not worried about whether the parking fee is $8 or $9 or $22. It's, what's my airfare? So I think that's pretty, we still have a lot of room in our parking fees to raise them. And also, is pointed out by Mr. Nolan, the parking lot is full during the winter, and at some point we may have to build, an accessory lot or build a parking garage in front of the building. That's going to be pretty expensive and sap up any extra revenue that we would get from an increase in parking fees.
Thank you. Kathleen, you were next.
I was not at the meeting, and I was wondering why was the max 19 a day? Just make it 20. If you're going to take out a $20 bill, do I care if I get $1 back early? It just seems silly.
I suppose
Increasing the parking fee is not just increasing. We are gonna potentially offer more parking spaces, create more parking spaces. So we are creating a convenience for our beloved customers here.
Well, let me ask, there's been quite a bit of discussion focused on the parking fees and different presentations from each of you. Where would you like to land on this? Does somebody want to make a motion about adjusting the parking rates? Do we want to go Peter's way, just do it all in one fell swoop? Do we want to do it, Kathleen, raise it to 20? I mean, we have several suggestions, so is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
And I am going to support what Kathleen just said, and that is I would like to see the parking rates go up to $6 and $20. That's what I would like to see.
Second.
No, wait, I want to be sure I understand. So you're talking about $20 a day or $6 an hour,
Right, and starting immediately.
starting immediately. And there was a second, who did the second?
Starting with the 2021 budget.
No, we'll have some discussion now on that. Norm?
I'm just concerned that if we are talking about running out of parking, that we need to start dealing with a financing plan for whatever. And I know we've dealt, there's something in regard to our master plan regarding this, but I'm just really concerned about increasing the parking fees and assuming that should all go into operating. And maybe we should increase parking fees, but at least let's start building some kitty or something. Because as was pointed out, it's going to cost a lot of money, and we're not going to get that back quickly if we have to either buy a lot or multi-story or whatever. So maybe Tom could describe kind of where we are in future parking. But
Well, we do have a plan, and we've got a big, beautiful lot on Kirk Douglas. And it can hold up to 900 spaces. Every airport in the country has some form of remote parking. In fact, it is better service because those that park there are dropped right in front of the curb rather than walking and so forth. So we don't have to worry about large parking structures, which we couldn't afford now anyway.
so the incremental cost of 900 spaces is going to be fairly low, that's what you're saying.
It is. Well, now, with the city manager's plan of going out for an RFP on parking next year, what we would do is integrate into that program a full shuttle program and perhaps also some other amenities that might assist in the whole parking program. The existing internal lot, we can remove those islands. We had a program to do that years ago, but it became a little expensive at that time, where we could create, I believe, up to 60 or 70 spaces, which is a lot in terms of the 930 spaces. By the way, we're not full. We still have latitude of about maybe 7% during peak season. So we're still there if we remove those islands, but in the longer term, the Kirk Douglas is a savior on this aspect.
If
Would that
we
be
do
considered
increase
more of a
rate,
long-term lot, excuse me, Norm? Would that be like a long-term, like a lesser
It can
rate?
be either or. You can make it credit card only. People love that autonomy. There's not cash, so there's all kinds of varieties of things to do.
if we do increase rates, does it make sense to invest in getting those additional spaces on the existing lot?
Well, it would be prudent to take a portion of that, especially if we're talking about accelerating it for the next couple of years.
We actually took a walk around a couple of meetings ago. I went with Tom and a few others did too, to take a look at those areas with Swarmo. I mean, I think Guillermo was on that too, so.
Well, we were looking at the bird droppings on the
We're also,
That's why we need to remove.
we're also literally removing some of those.
The landscaping, that's it.
Yeah.
At
Jeff?
some point, you run the risk of somebody coming in with a private parking lot. I mean,
I don't know, we've had inquiries, I don't know if we're that big and lucrative to warrant that kind of investment. You just try to amortize somebody's, it just isn't there. Maybe 20 years when we're at 5 million passengers. But it just doesn't pencil out for a PPP private partnership. It's not there.
Any other question? I just, to Mark, do you know what the effect of that motion would be on the revenue? I mean, do you have the math available to you at hand? No, okay.
But we would incorporate it into the
Right. No, I know, I just don't even want it in that. Now, this also presupposes then that you all are supporting, continuing to support the funding from the airport engineer as well as the marketing. Am I correct? So I just want to be sure that that doesn't get dropped in the conversation.
So do we need a motion for that?
Well, it's included, it would be included in the overall motion. I mean, there's a motion now just regarding the parking, but then we would have to follow that with a motion for the recommendation of the budget as presented or as modified, depending on.
So could I amend the motion to include the 2 positions as part of the parking motion?
Well, it's already in the.
Yeah, it's already in here.
Okay.
It's in the budget. This is part of the budget, and what we're doing is approving actually the bottom line, which includes the positions above.
And right now, the motion is only pertaining to the parking, the recommendation regarding the parking rate, which is part of that.
Which then, right. And what the only thing that's going to be put in just is the ultimate potential surplus of each year, which is available. Okay, Jan, we have you and then Mike. Good.
Before we make a decision about the parking, there's one item not listed under special capital projects, which is landscape conversion. We have 8 acres of grass out there. There's nothing in there to even incrementally address that issue. You know, it would take maybe $300,000 a year to begin the process of doing it gradually over several years. So, you know, where is that under this list of special capital projects?
Reaction, response? I don't have to answer that. Jan.
We're going off, I'm calling the question on his motion.
Okay, you want to close off discussion on this and go, okay. We will still come back to your question, Mike, but Jan is calling for the question. So the motion before us is to increase immediately the per hour cost at $6 an hour and daily rate at $20 an hour. All those in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? So it's unanimously adopted. So that's the adjustment there. I think now we need a motion for the budget as a whole.
No, airline rates?
Pardon me?
Airline rates?
Oh, and then you want to talk about the airline rates, okay.
Well, we can first need to finish Michael.
That's Michael. But who you wanted to
Well,
talk?
Michael's has the issue now on landscape.
On the landscape.
Separately, I think we should have some discussion of the airline rate.
Well, do you have a question on the airline rates?
I guess the question is there any, it seems like a small increase, the figures seem to justify. Tom, do you have any concern about our competitiveness by doing this?
No, we're still in the lower echelon there. And let me remind everyone, Mr. Chairman, the current agreement with the airlines calls for a residual. That means if all revenues come in, and if there's a deficit, they're liable for that as a signatory carrier. So that mechanism is there. When we brought on 3 additional police officers for $745,000 last year, that's the mechanism. So whatever that figure is, I think if you're going to raise parking and look at the concessions, whatever the residual is, will be incorporated into the cost per claim.
And that's the 581.
Yeah, and give or take, it could be 579 and a half, or
okay,
whatever that figure is, will exercise a residual procedure in the agreement.
And I know we're voting right now on the airline rates, but I do want to just say I have full confidence that the food and beverage people will be taken care of, but there's a very slim bottom line to them. So I'm concerned about that increase.
About food and beverage, from the 8 to 12%.
Pardon?
From the 8% to the 12%, in terms of percentage back there. Let me do this sequentially. Are there any concerns about the airline rates that have been proposed? Yes, Mr. Gray.
So I suspect one of the questions we'll have to articulate an answer to is, well, certainly it's in their agreement that they have to cover this, but does that mean all of a sudden we're going to get perspective, well, we're trying to get new airlines, they won't be able to come, the flights are doing, they're going to come back, that sort of thing. It's sort of a rhetorical question, but I think, Tom, what is the best answer to that? I think that's worth knowing.
It is, and the best answer is, and I would ask Rolf and Peter to chime in, and others as well, but we're still extremely competitive. We will be sitting at Jumpstart. If you look at where we are compared to the rest of the country, we're still extremely competitive. We're in the lower percentile, and there's a lot more latitude there, and they recognize that. And go ahead, Rolf.
And the reality is that we've changed the incentive program, and the incentive program addresses the rates and charges. So there you have the opportunity to waive those charges, especially when attracting new service. So that's the offset there. So the impact would not really be on the air service development, for new entrants, because you would be waiving some of those rates and fees anyway.
Any other discussion on the airline rates?
Michael's question on the landscaping program.
Well, let's finish with these two first. We will go back to the landscape. I just want to be sure, in terms of the potential revenue offset, that we made an adjustment to the parking. Are you all okay with the airline rates? Because we're going to ultimately have a motion to accept the budget as proposed here, which will include all of that. I just want to be sure there's no other exceptions to that question. And Patricia's expressed concern about the 8 to the 12%. Does that mean you want to suggest any change to this calculation?
Well, I actually have confidence in Tom to take a look at the whole picture. I think we have to bear in mind that if we want to get people into the airport, quality food, they have a very slim bottom line, okay? So you have to bear that. I don't think that's the place to raise the money. But I have confidence in Tom.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that confidence, but I'm very good at eating food, not necessarily. We're going to start your committee review of the consultant's report, and I think we probably are best to contour a motion where it gives us latitude based on the recommendation of the committee and the consultant as to what's tolerable in terms of margins for food.
That makes sense, and all I want to do is make a comment.
I mean, I'm not sure whether that will allay your concerns, but I can tell you that as far as event management is concerned, when you're talking to with concessionaires at events, you have actually revenue sharing up to 20%. And they seem to be doing very well with that.
I'm used to working with more local dealers, so I trust you.
But I did like
No,
to.
but I mean, there are big margins, and of course it depends on what you're dealing with, whether it's event or location or.
No, I like the suggestion of having some latitude for the decision.
How does that get phrased?
That's a good phrase. That we will decide in the process of the new concession RFP what's appropriate for industry and competitiveness.
Okay. So we do that increase with that kind of funding. All right, now we get to the question, Michael, you wanted to ask a question about landscape.
I asked the question, which is where in this list of special capital projects is the money for begin landscape conversion? And I see here grounds maintenance, but I assume that that's just normal operating charges.
Why don't you give a little overview, since you chaired the sustainability committee, what came out with that, just to refresh everyone's memory?
Well, nothing came out. We had one meeting, and we started the process beginning with how do we finance this. There were no conclusions that we could reach at that time, and I had hoped that to be able to come back to the commission with a plan after our next meeting, but the next meeting apparently won't happen until May, so it's a little late for the budget process. At a minimum, it seems if we could just put in a line item, and then we'll come back with how we can start using that money to begin the process.
Yeah, I would support Michael, and having increased the parking now, above what we see in here, we're talking about probably another $400,000-500,000, and why can't we sort of set an item of 100,000 or 150,000 just to get the process started?
To do the conversion to.
Do you have an estimate of the cost of the project?
Yeah, was there?
The only number we have is what the potential cost was for the proposal that had been made previously, which was $4 million for 8 acres, as I recall.
That is correct.
We don't have to do everything at once.
No, it can be gradual.
So just looking at the rates, the parking rates, the increase from 17 to 18, and doing the 4 or the 5 over the 2-year period, looks like each dollar's worth about $200,000. So, yeah, so we've already gone to 2021 rates. We still have another $200,000 when we go to $20 that theoretically could use toward landscaping. So maybe designate $150,000 of that as the first down payment to be determined, because there should be some offset savings when you go from green grass
Right, there
to
should be some
desert.
offset.
You would think so. That isn't always the case. Because it depends on how elaborate that transition is.
Yeah.
If it's just gravel, you're right, but if it's barrel cactus and other plantae that consume 30 gallons of water every time, 3 times a day,
a palm tree in itself can consume a lot of water.
I know about palm trees, but,
Well,
go ahead.
Hang on, Rolf, just a second, did you read it?
Well, I mean, it seems like if we do a $150,000 down payment this year, while we get our program together and get it started, that will get us on our way. Would you agree with that, Michael?
I would agree. You know, one of the first steps we could take is to ask people who are skilled in landscape conversion, you know, what can we do the first year for 150,000? What can we do the second year for 150 or 200,000? Just to get the process going, and that will help us lay out a plan over several years.
Okay, Peter, you have.
well, I just wanted to address the cost saving. I mean, the cost saving to me isn't really the important part, but you know, when you see the city is going, we're asking the residents to cut back, I think it's only fair that we address it and do our fair part. So to me, it's less a question of cost saving, but that we do our part.
Dave, remember, when is this budget going to the city council?
We're going to introduce it, the general fund's first meeting in May. Nancy, the airport budget, second meeting in May?
Yes.
So obviously, I think you're probably going to have your meeting here before we actually introduce it. But the only problem is the agenda's due the Thursday before. So, but what I intend to do with the airport budget in particular is have the caveat that the council obviously is going to be subject to some additional recommendations for the engineer.
All right, we've had a discussion, I think we're time to what the feeling is, Guillermo. Last comment.
I support the idea of making a line item for the landscaping and also making accommodations enhancement to the parking lot and potentially more parking spaces. And also a reminder to keep in check with the deficit, so we stay focused and not go outside our means.
I guess my only comment is I'm always hesitant. I wish I knew what the projection was going to be based on the recommendation we made. So, I mean, there's some estimates that you've made and we can all kind of make. I'm not adverse at all if somebody wants to make a motion to a line item for that. But I guess one of them I want to protect personally. If the budget, depends the way it works out, are the two positions for the airport engineer and the marketing. I don't want those in any way affected by adding another line item, which we're just doing at the 11th hour without the appropriate revenue projections. That always makes me uncomfortable on a budget this size, but I'm comfortable, Mr. Chairman, if somebody wants to make a motion putting that in.
I'd like to move that we add a line item of 150,000 for landscape conversion. And I understand your concern about protecting those positions. I do have one question, though, about both of those positions. Would they be dedicated to the airport? Only the airport?
Yes,
Dave,
that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So they won't be working for any other city agency?
Well, no, the engineer will be working for the city, will be under the city manager's office.
Right.
In conjunction with the airport, but it will be dedicated only to the airport. So,
Second.
Okay. Anyone want to call for a question?
I do have a question about that.
Okay, then discussion. Go ahead, Patricia.
Thank you. And I apologize, I was out of town, I wasn't at the landscape meeting. But have we determined a plan? We're budgeting an amount of money that's optional because we don't know really what our plan is going to. So I'm just, which comes first, chicken or the egg?
The money comes first.
Well, then if you're all in agreement, I'm fine.
And it seems to me, if that's the case, it's adopted, you need to call the meeting so that you can start to talk about it. David?
Mr. Chairman, just to go to your point, because you do raise a good point, just legally, since it's being paid by the airport fund, it would need to be paid. The work would have to be fully for the airport, and if it's any different, that portion would have to come from a different fund. So that should give you assurance it would be dedicated to the airport.
Anyone want to call for the question?
Question.
Okay. The motion before us is setting aside a line item for landscape conversion at $150,000 with the understanding that the committee will actually meet and give us some feedback maybe at the next meeting on what we get for that $150,000.
Mr. Chairman, what I would suggest for that, since it's not a significant amount of money, and we have the 8 acres, at the subcommittee level, what I think would be helpful is if we identify the areas of priority to do first, and then we use that money to start the design for that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we'll come back to the budget.
Yeah, very good, David. Yeah. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, I think now we're ready to adopt the budget as a whole with these adjustments. Is there a motion to approve the budget?
I so move.
Second. We have a second. Any further discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the budget as amended is unanimously adopted.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, moving on. So we've done item 11, Executive Director and Staff Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are opening our ticketing wing project bids as of May 2nd. Keep our fingers crossed that that holds true. There are some dynamics on that are dynamics at this point. Car rental, we have completed the negotiations with Gensler Architects on the scope of work, and it has been sent to the car rental partners who are going to scrutinize that since indirectly we're paying for that out of the CFC fund, and then it'll go to the city council. Water quality notice. Water quality notice. Not for discussion, but just we received a letter from the Colorado River Basin Regional Water Quality Board that there is a substance in our aqueous film foaming foam, which is used for aircraft rescue and firefighting. All airports in California received a notice that they have 60 days, we have 60 days to comply with a work plan that is going to test soils and test waters to see what, if any, potential release could have been made in any source of water. The good news is we have very, very minimal of that based on that. So we had to do some quick thinking here and hire some consultants, and we had our first call yesterday. So there may be more to come from a budgetary perspective on this after the state reviews the work plan. If it requires some monitoring wells and so forth, it could be potentially in a couple of $100,000 range to get that done. So just FYI. Checkpoint, things have calmed down quite a bit, and we talked about that program. We're actually going to build that into the larger ticketing program, and that's a little complicated to discuss now. Concessions, the consultant has finished phase 1 of the report, and you want to talk about how that's going to be in committee eyes here?
Yeah, I think, and I talked to Jan earlier, because that falls under the operations, properties, and facilities, to have you call a meeting and to review then the report.
Yes, and then the commission will have to make some decisions
Right.
on, some key decisions on what they're going to recommend to council on that. The airline agreement analysis continues. It's evident now, based on the feedback of the consultant, we'll have to extend the existing agreement until the end of the ticketing project in 2020 for a number of good reasons. That at that time we'll have a better idea about the introduction of baggage handling systems and other components, what the operational requirement is. And we're also analyzing, we talked about residual. There's also compensatory, and then there's a hybrid between the two. So we're looking at what the industry is doing, where the trends are going in the industry, and perhaps look at different methodology here for the betterment of the, we're actually meeting with them Thursday to talk about that a little bit. That concludes my reports, but we're also going to integrate in the presentation of the CVP, we're going to talk about airline marketing.
Okay. Shall we, do you want to move to?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Could you explain for the commission the difference between compensatory residual? Because I think the agreement we have is handcuffs us more than others.
I don't know if I can't in a brief statement, we're just giving an overview. At the appropriate time, we're going to be bringing back recommendations from Ocado and we can get into a deeper conversation. It's a much too complicated topic to give a brief overview. So if we can move to the CV.
Tom,
Okay.
before we leave your report, when did you say the bids for the ticketing lien are going to be?
May 2nd.
I thought that that was supposed to happen on the...
It wasn't, but it's been extended to May 2nd.
So, go ahead. Well, one quick question, I just, in fairness, because this was an important meeting because we're adopting a 2-year budget, number one, so I'm not worried about the time. I just wasn't maybe worried, David, about your time. Did you want to make any of your reports about council so that, okay, you're fine if we keep going. All right, I just wanted to check in with you. All right, then yes.
Yes, you're on by. Dim the lights.
I'll do this very quick.
Sit back and relax and see what our great partners at CBB, all the lights, please. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So going back to about 2015, the CBB created a destination development plan, and part of that was airline support. So we do what the airport can't do with the airlines. And I'm going to kind of take you through this. There's a lot of slides, I'm going to go through them kind of quickly. You know, raise your hands if you want to do questions, and we'll go through it. So part of the first ones that we do is television. So the CBB is already out there advertising. We have a lot of television in all our major markets. So this is JetBlue, and it's an example. I'm going to take you through all the airlines pretty quickly. So we tag.
This is entertainment.
Okay. So I'm a really fast talker. So if you look at the New York market, we already have about 4,300 ads a month on cable television there. And what we've done is we've tagged all those ads with JetBlue. And we start about 3 months before their service starts, and we end about a month before their service ends. And this is, again, to support JetBlue. This is New York. And what I did is I brought a commercial we can play at the end. And this is Boston. Again, the same project was done. Here again, the same 43, the time frame, November through March. The value, JNS, who's our agency for the value of all the advertising on here. But again, this is just tagging all our existing advertising. Chicago, this is with American Airlines. They're a great partner. They're actually fun to work with, just like JetBlue. Atlanta, this was new for this year. Is the Delta airline flight from Atlanta. And again, the same setup. We work with them. We work with Delta Vacations, but again, they're tagged in an ad.
Can you explain what tagging is?
Okay, you know what?
Bob, take your time. Really.
Let's just play one ad.
Get
And you'll see it.
Get into the detail.
Well, we just make other commercials, you'll understand what I'm saying. So it's basically our commercial, and we insert into there American Airlines, you know, or some message for the airline in the middle of the commercial. I brought 3 of them, so I don't know which one she'll play. You'll kind of get the idea. This is the destination ad with the airline.
Now, on your previous slides, talk a little bit, it talked about number of spots at the bottom myself.
Yeah, so you just...
She's going to play with that.
Okay.
Talk about...
So, what you do, so...
Turn the volume down on your computer while you play with that. Try to...
So if you imagine the CBD, New York's a big market. It's been growing for us about 5% a year. And so we've already put our television out there. We look at all the cable stations we should be on. And we do all that work just for the destination. So it makes sense that when JetBlue is adding a flight, that on those ads, you know, when you see a destination ad, you know, come to Palm Springs, come to the area, that it says fly, you know, JetBlue, somewhere in the commercial, nonstop service, PSP, or something like that throughout the ad. So that's what all this tagging of ads that are going on. This is a huge benefit to the airline because these airlines are not running direct service or direct route ads. So for the fact that they get tagged onto all of our ads or included, their marks within our ads is a big advantage to them because they're not doing advertising specifically for each route. You know, they'll do a lot of digital and they'll do a lot of other work within their network, but they won't actually go out and buy advertising to promote the route. So in turn, what we do is we use our existing advertising and add them and fold them in.
Is there a reason you use the term value instead of cost?
You'll see that, yes, because this is how the agency values the cost of our buy, but it's not our actual cost. So these are the rack rates.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are the rack rate lines.
So you should pay half that, or?
Yeah, and they're all negotiated rates, and since we can't really say what the rates are,
Okay.
what you guys always see, we either put value or impressions. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So Bob, She'll continue clicking there. Bob, talk about just the relationship, when you have dialogue with the airlines, how do you arrive at a conclusion, how much and what you're gonna spend it on?
So that's at the end of the deck, but, so let's say that we go to Jumpstart and we're adding a new flight, and you can make it, let's say it's Fort Lauderdale to PSV, right? So the airport sits and does all their stuff and negotiates everything you guys can do on your side. And then what we do is go on the other side and work directly with the airport and our advertising and their advertising to add lift for that particular flight to ensure that that flight is full. Does that make sense? On the other side. So as we already have advertising, we're placing it. Then we go on with the airlines and we do digital advertising with them and actually put together co-ops. And then we look at their newsletters and we look at everything where we can jointly, additionally pay fees to promote that particular route. And that's what I'm going to take you through, is all that sort of stuff. But it makes sense because, and then what the airlines will do is, like we work really closely with JetBlue, and the New York flight's been doing really great, but United added a flight this year, and the Atlanta flight actually took a little traffic away from New York. So they were a little sluggish, and normally we pull off in February. But because they're kind of sluggish through May, we kept on our campaign, tagging them on our campaigns all the way through April. Does that make sense?
Well, technical.
Okay. I know it's hard to play this. Do you want to play or do you want to?
Well, apparently.
Okay. You know what I can do is I'm just going to do these hands. Go ahead. Maybe I'll have something to remember this whole presentation from. But that's just television, and then we're going to walk through all the other formats. And then you kind of see, so when you're in market, I'm going to kind of tell you what you see in market in New York, which you don't see here.
How do you measure the success?
You know, it's really interesting. We work with JetBlue and we work with all the airlines, and they actually are really good partners about telling us the number of clicks back and what worked and what didn't work. And it's like any campaign we do, we go back and measure the results and we adjust the advertising the following year, and we adjust the dates. So it's really hard, like our office, way back in August, because the JetBlue flight starts earlier every year for New York. This year we go back to September. So that would mean 60 days before that, because of the booking window, we'll be in New York promoting the JetBlue flight that starts in September, because the way people buy seats. So we look through how far people buy seats, how far out to put the advertising, and we work with them on the same campaign. So we kind of finished up TV. I'll send you one of the ads so you kind of get an idea what they look like. But it goes beyond TV, it goes to print. So with Alaska Airlines, you know all the in-flight books. We put together the co-ops, which everybody buys into, which is actually there for the flights. And as you can see, we're in the months of March, October, November issues this year. And it's out for all the passengers, and it's a multi-page spread of the destination. Again, this reminds people. So this is saying there's 11.4 million impressions from this one magazine co-op to people that are flying on Alaska Airlines. Do you ever open up those magazines and look through them? And this would be one of the destination ads. Same thing we do with WestJet. They're a great partner to work with. And you can see the months we're in with them for March and November. November obviously is the kickoff for their high season. We put together the same co-ops, about 3 million impressions from our advertising with WestJet. American Airlines, another great partner to work with. They have 710,000 copies that get put on their planes for the month. And you can see from here it reaches about 17.5 million people. This is a new initiative that we just started. So one of the things that we've been doing for years is we've been talking to the consumers. Well, now we're actually talking to the airline route planners. So what we did is we looked at all the publications that the airline route planners read. And we're now advertising to them and telling them that we should be one of their choices for their next few routes, and giving them the reasons that they don't know why they should be booking or looking at this destination. And this kind of sets us up for the trade shows. These are two of the current ads at Skift, and here's another one. So when we actually are Jumpstart, they'll see ads like this. So the route planners from all the airlines will know, wow, we never thought about Palm Springs. This is really great. Maybe we should consider adding a route. It doesn't make sense, or what to do. Digital. The world is here really large, And you can see one of the little ads they're animating, that's what they have for JetBlue. And tell the weather to take a hike. So it's very interesting. We work with their agency, Mullen, out of Boston, on all the creative for JetBlue. It gives you an idea, 32 million impressions, exactly what goes on. And this is the Boston ads. And then this is New York. And New York has a slight different look for them. And again, this is all the digital advertising that's done to promote the taglines that they like in New York, which are slightly different than what we use. But they know their passengers the best, and they work on all the creative. We extended JetBlue, I just mentioned that a few minutes ago. And again, you can see one of their digital ads. You know, one of the things we've done with our website is, you know, when you're in New York and you go on a website, a destination website, they don't see the same page you see here in Market. So when you're in New York and you go on our website or any other city other than Southern California, you actually end up with a different landing page. And on that landing page, we promote air services and direct flights. So they have a totally different setup as you hit other destinations, and it actually comes up with a little chart that tells you how to book your flight and who has the direct service. Because one of the best things we want to remind people is there's a lot of direct service to this destination. We've done the same thing on Expedia. So as the CPD works with Expedia to promote all the hotels, we also now take all the direct airline flights and put them on our page. So when you're on Expedia and you're looking for this destination, you can see all the airfares along with all the hotel rates. Another way, again, to put the airlines in front of our visitors. This is meetings. A lot of time is spent on meeting planners because meeting planners are all about direct service. You can see, I don't know if that's the little map that kind of tells them what it is. There's a whole series of videos about what a great airport this is, how to use it, and all the direct service. I don't know if it'll work. But I can send you the links to all of these if you're interested in seeing all these ads, or you can go to our website and actually go on to the meeting planner
We will
site,
access
and
and
you'll see
play
it.
them at the ensuing meetings.
Yeah.
Very interesting. No clicking?
Yeah. What's next? So now I can. You got the clicker in? It's also complicated.
Well, it's a tremendous.
You know, one of the best things is we all have a great relationship with these airlines, and because of these programs that we're doing and because of the work the airport's doing, it's really easy now to pick up a phone and call one of them and say, what do you think about this, what do you do that? And even the route planners are becoming more calling us and saying, what do you think about things, versus us always having to do outreach. We continue to do outreach because we want to get those flights. But developing those relationships is what is most important long-term to the destination. Instagram, if you know anything about Instagram, it's the new travel fund space. So again, we're in all the top 10 US markets doing Instagram. This is usually one of our campaigns that we did. 1,200 clicks to the website. Again, really running in key markets. Influencers. These are one of the things and activations the airlines love to do. And this is one of the ones we did with JetBlue, and it was sweepstakes for the Boston flight. And so we got all these influencers to go out and talk about the route, and then people could go and enter to win to be on the inaugural flight. It was all done on JetBlue end, but we actually put together all the work for it.
Wonderful.
This is just a little, people wonder how much we actually spend on our portion beyond, this doesn't include our advertising, this is just money that we actually spend with the airlines. So last year's budget was $462,000. In our 18-19 budget, we're at $647,000 that we're spending with advertising. So this is the ad cycle where we're doing digital with Delta or digital with JetBlue. This is the actual funding that we're actually spending to do all that work to help them promote the flights on the other end. Does that make sense to you? Mm-hmm. So it does not include the dollars we spent on our advertising. We just did an overlay on them that was already in the market.
All of this is focused on the U.S. market.
No, Canada too. WestJet.
Okay.
It's all Flair, even though they didn't stay. We started working with them.
U.S. and Canada. What about Europe and Asia?
With Europe and Asia, we have no direct service. Okay. But if tomorrow, one of the airlines wanted to fly here direct, we'd be all over it. Really fast. I think, if JetBlue goes to London, then we might do more to JFK, London, here. Fort Lauderdale would really give us more of the Caribbean.
Right.
So whatever it does, Tom and everybody, so we work on the other end to ensure, once the deal's cut, those flights get filled and you got people in seats.
So talk about, you're doing a lot of promotion in our international markets for your destination.
Yeah, so beyond, this is what we do on the advertising side. So on the non-advertising side, we have a whole department called Travel Trade, and they work with all the wholesalers on the other end to promote service and getting flight books and all the rest. So there's a whole international section, and PR, again, this does not include all the work done by our PR people. And if you look at the number of articles that get written about air service, it's a mess. So I can do a whole thing on airports, but I just watched today, Colleen had put this together for an internal presentation, and I think Scott had sent it over to Tom, just give him a quick update on what we're doing. So I came today just to give you a quick update on just the marketing, advertising portion of it. But we spent a lot of time with these people, and really have become really good friends with them.
Well, that's true.
Over the years.
We wouldn't be where we are today without the collaborative effort.
Yeah.
I think it's really. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and thank you again for that presentation. I think that helps explain a little bit some of the passenger increase too. I mean, we've been really learning about using voucher. Any other commissioner requests or reports?
At the budget meeting, I was allowed to speak with the FAA for the airport, which was very, very helpful. From that meeting, I'd like to, and I understand that at the next meeting, we're going to have a presentation about financing. I understand that the financing for the ticket wing is moving together quickly. But one of the things I'd like to request the city to strongly consider is having co-manage one or two MWBE minority veteran zone co-manager as part of the transaction. I mean, we are a liberal city. We support small businesses and minority businesses. I think in this particular case, on a $30 to $40 million bond issue, there's definitely room for a co-manager or two that meets those criteria. And if the state treasurer's website under public finance has a list of state treasurer approved small business, veteran-owned businesses, et cetera, underwriting firms. And if they do that, that the agreement among underwriters, the AAU, is structured in a way that that the small business, that the co-manager has an opportunity to sell bonds and get credit for institutional orders. That's it.
Okay, thank you. We'll have some discussions internally on where to go about that. Any other commissioner requests or reports? Seeing none, any report on council items, we said no. Any correspondence? No. Receive and file the airline activity report for 2019 and airline schedules.
Hasn't been received
It has not been received yet. Okay, I'll just go behind. Then we're down to adjournment. And again, we don't usually go this long, but this was a very important meeting because the budget discussion is setting the base for the next year. All right, anyone want to make a motion for adjournment?
So